Okay, today we're going to discuss the sugya on Daf Dal Amud Beis, which discusses bia as a method for Kiddushin. So we all know from the beginning of the year that there are three methods for Kiddushin: Kesef, Shtar, and bia, money, contract, and marital relations. We already spent a lot of time talking about Kesef. We learned that Kesef, we said the source for Kesef is from a Gezerah Shava of Kicha Kicha. We did not spend so much time talking about shtar, and now we're going to talk about bia. We actually spoke about in the beginning of the year a little bit. Bia is actually very interesting because bia is actually the one out of all these three which is not really practiced. In practicality, the rabbis decided that bia is not the right or appropriate way to have kiddushin. That you don't want to start a marriage, a kiddushin, with relations. At the same time, it's interesting because bia, out of all three, is the only one that seems to be explicitly written in a pasuk. So let's learn about this a little bit more. Let's now begin the Gemara. So the Gemara begins by saying, Uva Allah, which is quoting from the pasuk, and that the man has relations with his wife. Melamed sheniknes bia. This teaches us that a woman can be acquired with bia. So that sounds great. All fine and dandy, that we have a source in the Torah, there's a pasuk, clear as day, that a woman can be acquired with bia. But the Gemara asks, V'halo dinhu? Is this not logical? Couldn't we learn out bia from a logical way? Do we need a pasuk for it? What would be the logic? Uma yavama she'ein niknes b'kesef niknes b'bia. If you have a woman who has to do yibum, we know she cannot be acquired with kesef, but only through bia. Zu, this woman in a regular case, sheniknes b'kesef, who can be acquired with money. Eino din sheniknes b'bia. All the more so, shouldn't you say that if kesef works for her, then bia should work for her as well? Let's take a look at our chart for a second to understand this. So the logic is like this: if ba'yavama, where kesef does not work, but bia works, so you would think in a regular case where kesef works, so logically bia should work too. That is the logic. Now, what's wrong with this logic? So the Gemara says, Ama Ivriya Tochiach. The case of an Ama Ivriya will disprove this logic. Just to quickly review who is an Ama Ivriya? An Ama Ivriya is a Jewish maidservant. When a father will give over his young daughter to be a servant in someone's house because he can't raise her himself financially, so she becomes part of the owner's household. And the Gemara says, Ama Ivriya Tochiach. The Ama Ivriya will disprove the logic. How so? Sheniknes bekesef, because an Ama Ivriya can be acquired with money, ve'ein niknes b'bia, but she cannot be acquired with bia. So you see here very clearly that you could have a case where kesef works and bia does not work. So the logic is rejected. Again, if an Ama Ivriya can be acquired with money, but not through bia, so that's exactly what the regular case is. The regular case is where a woman can be acquired with money, but not through bia. So don't tell me this logic that if Yavama bia works, then it should work by regular case too. That's not true. Ama Ivriya will tell you that logic would not necessarily stand up. However, the Gemara responds and says, Ma'ala Ama Ivriya she'ein kinyan l'shamishus. What comparison are you making here? What comparison can you make to an Ama Ivriya she'ein kinyan l'shamishus? Her being acquired is not for the sake of marriage. It's just to be a servant, to be a slave in the house. Tomar Bazu, can the same be true by this case, by the case of a regular woman? Shekinyan l'shamishus, who is being acquired for the sake of marriage. You're comparing apples and oranges by saying that that the Ama Ivriya case will be the thing to disprove our case, because it's not the same. One is for marriage and one's for not marriage. So it comes out that we're rejecting the rejection, which would mean that our original logic still stands, that we can learn based off of Yavama that bia works for a regular as well. That's what we have over here, rejection of the rejection. Amma Avriya can't disprove our case of Kiddushin because Amma Avriya has nothing to do with Kiddushin or Bia. It's not applicable. It's just a different case. So of course she can't be acquired through Bia because after all, it's why would she be able to be acquired through Bia? Because she's not being married here. She's just working. But for a regular case where she's getting married, so you could go back to the logic and say that Bia should work. However, we'll see that this logic does not in fact work. Continuing in the Gemara, Talmud Lomar, the pasuk teaches us Uva Allah, that again the pasuk that says that a man cohabits with her to marry her. And again the Gemara asks, V'lam likra ha'asila. We already brought down a kal v'chomer. We already brought down logic. Why do we need a pasuk for it? Going back to really the original question. So Amar Ravashi answers, Mishum de'ikala meimar, because we can say, Me'ikara the dina, the original logic that we had, pircha was flawed. There's something incorrect, something wrong with that original logic. So what's wrong with the logic? So mehecha kamais isla, from where do we know that Bia works for marriage? Yavama, from the case of Yavama. But we'll see. Yavama and a regular case are not the same. They can't be compared. They're also apples and oranges. Why? Mali Yavama shekain zekuka viomedes. A Yavama has something what we called zika. She has a pre-existing bond, relationship to her brother-in-law. Tomar bazu she'ein zekuka viomedes. Would we say the same by a regular case where she has no bond, no relationship to anybody? She's free to marry whoever she wants. You can't compare Yavama to a regular case because a Yavama, you can understand why Bia works. Because Bia is the next step. She's already sort of connected to somebody. She's connected to her brother-in-law. But the regular case where you're not connected to anybody, Bia would not be the first step. You have to first, have kesef or shtar. You have to live together. You have to get to know each other, not live together. So, Talmud Lomar Uvala. Therefore, the Torah needs to teach us Uvala, that you could have Bia for Kiddushin. The Torah, the pasuk needs to tell us that because it wouldn't be obvious otherwise. Again, it wouldn't be obvious otherwise because you cannot learn it out from Yavama. Let's see this in the chart. This is our beautiful illustration of Zika. We're not going to get into this one now. Everyone in Shir knows this very well. It's saying like this. The pasuk for Bia is needed because the logic of comparing a regular case to Yavama is flawed. How is it flawed? By Yavama, it makes sense to say that Bia works for Kiddushin because there is a Zika, a pre-existing relationship between the woman and her brother-in-law. Bia completes that relationship. Remember, we learned in the beginning of the year that the whole purpose of Bia for Yavama is to continue the legacy of her dead husband. But in a regular case, where there is no Zika, it would not be logical to assume that Bia works for Kiddushin. Therefore, we need a pasuk. Gentlemen, sometimes we need a pasuk in the Torah to teach us something because we would not know it otherwise. The Torah needs to tell us. Let's look at this chart. Why do we need the Torah to teach us Bia? Why isn't Bia logical? Because in the case of Yavama, where there's a Zika, so when there's a Zika, the next logical step is Bia. But in the regular case, a regular single woman, where there is no Zika, Bia is not the logical step. So the only way that you would know that Bia works for Kiddushin according to the Torah is based on a pasuk. We need a pasuk to tell us that Bia works for Kiddushin. Again, in the end of the day, we did say that practically, right, today, Lamaisa, practically, Bia does not go for Kiddushin because the rabbis said that it doesn't work. They don't want that to be the method for Kiddushin. But technically, right, according to the Torah, it's not only a valid method for Kiddushin, but there's a pasuk that says that it works. Okay, this concludes this sugya on Daf Daled Amud Beis.